Welcome to another edition of 5-Star Pod Splash. I am your host, Andre Harris. And if this is your first time tuning in, make sure you guys go to Twitch and Facebook game streaming at The Whole Effin' Show. Hit that like, follow, subscribe. You can check out past episodes of Top 10 on The Whole Effin' Show. That's on Twitch and on Facebook. You can also check out previous episodes of Top 10 on my YouTube channel at Top Shelf TV. Today, we are going to be breaking down the top 10 PlayStation games voted on by several groups, coming to you live from Game Haven. Make sure you guys go, if you have a Facebook, search for Game Haven, and you will see this image that's on the screen right here to make sure you're in the correct Game Haven, because I believe there's a second Game Haven. And make sure you guys join so that you guys could take part in the polls. You could also take part in the voting polls by joining up at Rare Form Gaming as well. Make sure you guys go on Facebook, search for Rare Form Gaming, and join that group as well so that you can make your voices and votes heard on future episodes of Top 10. Today's Top 10, we are going to be breaking down the top 10 PlayStation 1 video games voted on by everybody from several groups, from Game Haven, Rare Form Gaming. Also, we got votes this time from Off the Ropes, a wrestling group. We got votes from FAD, which is an anime group. We also got votes from Afro Sam. My apologies. That's a dope anime group as well. We got votes from FWO, which is another wrestling group. And then we have Black Gamers Multiverse, which is a gaming group. So the votes for this episode of PlayStation Top 10 Video Games was actually voted on from several different groups. There was a lot of votes, so I had to tally up the total from all the groups to come up with this list of the top 10 voted on games by everybody from these 7 different groups. There's so many good video games for the PlayStation 1 that a top 10 would not be enough to include. There's so many games that need to get some type of recognition. So not only do we have a top 5 honorable mention, but we got a top 10 video games that did not make the top 10 or the top 5 honorable mentions. So with that getting said, I'm just going to go down the list. These are the top 10 games. Before we go over the top 10 and the 5 honorable mentions, these are the top 10 games that did not make honorable mention or did not make the top 10 list. Coming in at number 10 of top 10 games that did not make top 10 or honorable mention is Rival Schools. This was a game from Capcom. Man, this game is so slept on, man. It was really like one of Capcom's, like, they did the Street Fighter EX, but that really didn't go over well. That was a dud. But Rival Schools succeeded where Street Fighter EX did not. Whole new cast of characters, new setting. And man, this was a fun game. They had some fun mini games in this game as well. Definitely deserves to get some type of recognition, even though it didn't make honorable mention or top 10. Rival Schools is definitely one of those dope games. Some of the games on this did not make the top 10 list. Pretty shocking. Coming in at number 9 for games that didn't make honorable mention or top 10 is Brave Fencer Musashi. This was another one of those games, really fun back in the day. Brave Fencer Musashi. This game was just dope, man. I really like the style on it. And this is one of those games I ain't going to front, like, I initially picked up just based off of the box cover art. Like, man, being such a huge anime head, like, I had to check out this game, see what it's about. Plus, it was like a samurai. Like, who doesn't like ninjas and samurais? Coming in at number 8, this one was a game personally not in my top 10, but it almost made honorable mention, so I thought it'd only be right to include it, especially with the success that it's had, and that is Tomb Raider. So much to say about this game. Was one of those more so challenging games where you really got to figure things out. Female lead, that's always a positive because there ain't enough video games with the female lead as the main character. Mad success. I believe they had movies for Tomb Raider, several spin-off episodes and whatnot. So Tomb Raider definitely deserves to get a mention in top 10 games that did not make honorable mention or top 10. Coming in at number 7, I'm surprised this game did not make at least honorable mention. Super Puzzle Fighter 2 Turbo. This is like my favorite Tetris game of all time. Man, like, this was a hit in the video game, and it was also a hit in the arcades. Like, who didn't like Super Puzzle Fighter? I'm surprised it didn't make honorable mention at the very least. But man, there's some games on this not make honorable mention that are insane, including number 6, which was Resident Evil 2. That's right. Resident Evil 2 did not make top 10 or the top 5 honorable mentions. So I had to give it a shout out on top 10 games that did not make honorable mention or top 10 list. Coming in at number 5, you'll be shocked to also hear that Marvel vs. Capcom 1 did not make at least honorable mention, but this was voted on by several groups. There was hundreds of votes, so I can't really knock it. I mean, this is just the general consensus that everybody is voted on. Some of these games would have definitely made my top 10 or at least my honorable mention, but I can't just go off of my personal preference. I want to include everybody's opinions, and this is what the opinion is. Like, this game did not make top 15, so it at least made a top 25 in the sense of 10 games that did not get recognized in the top 15 games. This other game, this would definitely for sure be in my top. If it was Marvel vs. Capcom 2, it would definitely be in my top 10, probably my top 3. But that came out on PlayStation 2 and whatnot. Coming in at number 4 on did not make the list. This game definitely would have been in my top 10. PlayStation 1 Final Fantasy Tactics. Man, I love this style of RPG games, man. This was a fun game where you set different jobs and tasks and everything, you know, and people upgrade from like fencer to, you know, ninja and thief and all the little different lancer. And, you know, it was just a very fun strategic game. I love games like this, and I really wish there were more of them. Definitely think it deserved a follow-up in a sense, man. Final Fantasy Tactics, it was a slept-on game. Surprisingly, at least to make honorable mention. It was close to making honorable mention, but it did not make at least honorable mention. Coming in at number 3 for did not make honorable mention or top 10 is Xenogears, man. This is a game a lot of RPG heads really love, man. Some people will definitely have this over some of the more like mainstream RPG games like the Final Fantasy 7s and Final Fantasy 8 and whatnot. But yeah, Xenogears was definitely one of those games that like definitely doesn't get enough shine and credit. They had an excellent story. Fun game to play, man. It was just a really slept-on, underrated game. So definitely have to get a mention since it didn't make the honorable mention. I have to throw it in the top 10. There's too many games to just go top 10 in the 5 honorable mentions. So these are the games that did not, keep in mind, did not even make the 5 honorable mentions. So this would typically be really like the top 25 in a sense. Coming in at number 2 on the not honorable mention or top 10 list, this actually would have made the honorable mention if it was off by 1 vote, and that was Parappa the Rapper, man. Who did not like Parappa the Rapper, man? Like, this game, I'm surprised it did not have several spinoffs. It was such a fun game back in the day, even though it was just like press the button at a certain time. The story, the characters, everything about this game was just so like fresh, and it's still fresh because there ain't too many games like it, if any games like it, really. You know what I'm saying? The character and everything. Parappa was just that dude. Now that I think about it, I would love to see Parappa the Rapper added to like Super Smash Bros. Or something like that. But I don't know if it just being a exclusive to PlayStation game that it probably wouldn't make that transition. But I feel like there's games that PlayStation, or not PlayStation, but Nintendo would transition over. Parappa would definitely be one, in my opinion, that deserves to make that list. Coming in at number 1 on games that did not make honorable mention or the top 5, man. This game, if in my personal opinion, this would be my number 2 or number 3 at the very least game in the top 10 of my personal PlayStation 1 video games, and that is Suikoden 2. Man, this lets me know some of y'all must just be like, the people who vote on this, I don't know if they were just younger or they just didn't play a lot of games or whatnot, man, but I don't know how anybody could not have this game in their top 10 unless they haven't played it. And that's what I'm assuming is the case, that people did not play this game. In my opinion, you could really make the case that this was better than Final Fantasy 7. Like, this is the one game, like me personally, it's between this and Final Fantasy 7 for like my favorite PlayStation 1 game. Man, there was so much charm and so much stuff in Final Fantasy 7, but just like Final Fantasy 7 had so many different like mini games and side quests and stuff you could do, this really amplified it. Like, I really like the story. I feel Final Fantasy 7 probably had like a little bit more depth to its story in a sense, but man, like, this game was so damn fun. The mini games, the cooking game. So basically, you have this character, him and his best friend. They start off the game playing with these 2 people, but they end up splitting, you know, the other dude you play with, he ends up turning into the main bad guy or whatnot. But on this game, you would go around and you would basically, you have the option to get possibly 150 characters. But you have to do all these little different side quests, and you don't have to get them. But if you want to, you have the option of gathering up to 150 playable characters on this game, all with their own unique design, side missions, have mini games for certain characters that you'd have the option of picking up. Because one minute you could pick up a chef, and that would unlock like the mini games for being a chef. You have one for a farmer, and then you have options for making farmer, and one for like all these different little things. Because you have a castle, you become a king, and on your way to becoming a king, you gather up all these different people have different tasks, similar to like One Piece. How you got the navigator, you got the cook, you got the samurai. So it was like One Piece on steroids in a sense, like where you just go gather all these dope characters, man. So I really feel like Suikoden definitely being slept on in that sense, man. This is a classic game. I know PlayStation 1 is so old, like no one's gonna go back and play it. But man, if you played this game, you know what I'm talking about when I say how fire this game was. Definitely should have made top 10, at least honorable mention, but it did not, and that's the sad reality of the matter. So now let's get into the really the top 15 games. These are the 5 games that just did not make the top 10 from the votes. So these games, I take my personal preference out of it. These are basically the top 15 games, but the show's called Top 10, so these are the 5 honorable mentions. But if you want to, you could say this is number 15 coming in. Number 5 honorable mention would be Grand Theft Auto 1, the first original Grand Theft Auto game, man. I remember my homeboy Dennis, dude from New York, came out here to California, man, way back in the day, but he's the one who hit me and my brother and everybody to this Grand Theft Auto series from day one. And the graphics were so shitty compared to like the other Grand Theft Autos that would come out later on, San Andreas and Vice City and all that stuff. But what made this game so charming, aside from it being like the very first game where you go on and you throwing people out their car and you jacking people and all that stuff, what made this game so dope, and probably this is the only thing it was doper than the other Grand Theft Auto games, was the fact that during the PlayStation 1, which was like on the CD and everything, you could open up the PlayStation and you take out the game and you could put in whatever music CD you want to. So like when you're jacking somebody for their car and you riding around in the car that you just jacked the person for, you could take out the game, put in your game, and that's the music you listen to while you riding around in the car and you carjacking and you doing all your criminal activities and everything. So that would make this game stand out to me as a kid. We just always thought that was like the Flash. Like, yo, man, I could like take out the game and put in my CD, and now I'm like riding around in a car I just jacked, listening to my like album. Like that was so fire, like, man. So I'm glad it got its due, because I'm surprised a lot of people were hip to this game, because again, like me and my family on the West Coast, we didn't know about this game until my boy from the East Coast came over with this game. Honorable mention number 4. This is another game I'm kind of surprised even made the honorable mention, even though this is another game that would be in my personal top 10 games. Like, just because me and my boy Anthony, shout out to my boy Anthony Zamora, shout out to my boy Robert Daniel, you know what I'm saying, over there in Spring Valley, man, growing up with my homies over there on this block, man. Dude, we were so heavy on the anime and RPGs and all this, but this ain't an RPG game, but we're so heavy on the anime that like my boy Anthony, my boy Duke, my boy Robert, like they would have all the like SNES emulator games and stuff like that prior. So we're playing like all these old Dragon Ball games and stuff that like never made it to America and whatnot. But this was the first one that kind of made it to America. Like I can't recall if like we have to get like the burner on our PlayStation. I remember we had to do something to our PlayStation to play this game, but that is Dragon Ball GT, man. I put so much hours into this game. Me and my boy Anthony really mastered this game, bro. This and Marvel vs. Capcom 2 were like probably 2 of the games me and my boy Anthony played to death, bro. Like we played this shit like 24/7 nonstop, bro. Like we cannot be faded in this game, bro. Like Dragon Ball GT though, man, even though it had like several versions of Goku where they could have put in different characters, you know what I'm saying? It was like that first it was like the first 3D Dragon Ball game, you know, outside of those emulator games which weren't 3D at all. But it was something to it. It was just so fire, bro. From shooting the key beams and the battles with the key, and then like you lock up and you like swing, you know, like super speed, like on the cartoon and everything. Dragon Ball GT was just fire, bro. Like, and I was never big on the GT series, but the game, I love this game to death. And the intro to this day is probably still the best intro to a Dragon Ball game. That intro was so fire, bro. Like Dragon Ball GT, I'm glad I got an honorable mention. Honorable mention. It's another one of them games would definitely been in my top 10, along with GT, along with Suikoden, is Street Fighter Alpha 3. I'm glad Street Fighter finally getting some love in these polls because man, y'all been keeping Street Fighter off of these polls, and I'm a little confused because growing up, Street Fighter was that shit, man. It was Street Fighter, Mortal Kombat. You know, Killer Instinct came in for a little stint on the SNES, but after that, it was always Street Fighter or Mortal Kombat. Me being a Street Fighter guy, more so than Mortal Kombat. I love both, but Street Fighter is always going to be number one to me. Fighting game franchise. It's the daddy. It's the one that started shit off, in my opinion. So I'm glad it at least made the honorable mention. It would have personally made my top 10, but again, 7 groups, over hundreds of votes came in through all the groups and everything once you total them all together. So salute to everybody for voting. Make sure y'all vote on the next one. It's going to be real fun. It's going to be Nintendo 64 top 10. So that's going to be a good one. I know the more recent, the newer game systems, the more people are going to start to be included, because some of the older game systems, like, it was just, there's more younger people probably in these groups that interact and are more active than the old heads, you know, like myself. So like I feel like the more recent, around this time, because again, this like by far had the most votes on it, which is why I felt compelled to do a 25 as opposed to a 10. But you know, 10 that didn't make it, 5 honorable mention, and then the top 10. But anyway, at number 2, honorable mention, Final Fantasy VIII. Man, Final Fantasy VIII improved so much on the graphics of Final Fantasy VII. I just feel like Final Fantasy VII's characters, the story, like there's so much about Final Fantasy VII that just like really, it's spearheaded, like it gave the momentum for you to want to play these other Final Fantasy VII or these other Final Fantasy games. But Final Fantasy VIII, honorable mention number 2. Honorable mention number 1 is Spyro the Dragon, man. Like, man, I remember my cousin, man. He was a beast in this game, bro. Like, Spyro wasn't really my cup of tea all that much. Like, it was okay, but definitely ain't my top 10. Probably wouldn't even make my honorable mention, but this was very heavily voted on in the groups. Just barely did not make the top 10 and ended up being basically number 11. But yeah, just didn't crack that top 10 list. So now with the honorable mentions and the 10 video games that did not make top 10, let's get into the top 10. And coming in at number 10, I'm a little surprised this one got so many votes and made it into the top 10, but I'm glad it did. This was one of them games, it would have got an honorable mention on my personal top 10 list, so it would have been in like the top 15, but not top 10. And the reason it would have made my honorable mention, because like I have my older brother wasn't really much of a gamer, but one of the games I could get him to sit down and really play with us and not run him off was number 10, and that is Bloody Roar. Bloody Roar, I love the premise. You up in there, you whooping ass. The next thing you know, you go beast mode up in there. You know what I'm saying? The different animals that you could turn into were just fire, bro. Like, this was a really dope game. I'm glad it got a mention, because man, this was really a dope video game, man. A lot of people voted on Bloody Roar, and it almost got number 9. It lost out to number 9 by like 2 votes. I'm surprised this game only made number 9, but at number 9, we got X-Men versus Street Fighter, man. This would have definitely been in my top 10 personal PlayStation 1 games, man. Me and my boy, I said it before, me and my best friend back in the day, Andrew, we used to walk miles, bro. No bullshit. We used to walk miles, like at least 3-4 miles from our apartment complex every day on the weekend, and sometimes after school be cut in half, because like we'd have to walk to school, which would be like 2 miles, and then another 2 miles to get to like this bowling alley that had an arcade in it. Right when we heard this game got announced, like we would have never thought up until this point, Street Fighter and X-Men, like these are like 2 of my 2 favorite things from 2 different worlds, comic books and video games, merged together. It was like a dream come true, man. We would go down there every weekend, every other couple days, you know what I'm saying, saving up our money so that we could go down there and just get down on X-Men versus Street Fighter, man. This is the game that really revolutionized the game and set it off with Marvel versus Capcom and, you know, Marvel versus Street Fighter, X-Men versus Street Fighter. Like, this was that game, bro. And I like this one more than the first Marvel versus Capcom, actually, or the Marvel versus Street Fighter game, because, man, I was primarily an X-Men head. Like, that was my favorite Marvel franchise to begin with. So, like, I preferred the roster having a Gambit, having a Juggernaut, Sabretooth, Magneto, as opposed to taking out Gambit, taking out Sabretooth, taking out Juggernaut to throw in Shuma Guroth and Blackheart. And you know what I'm saying? Like, I'd rather have the X-Men people. And so this is the one that really had me more hyped than anything. So I'm glad it made the list. I'm glad other people recognize that too, because I would have figured that Marvel vs. Capcom and Marvel vs. Superheroes would have ended up getting more votes since they were like newer renditions of the game that had like added a couple little things like the little assists from like characters you can't play with. Me personally, I didn't like that, having the little characters that you can't play with, because like they were the characters I wish would have made the game. Like Thor, I was like, how the hell you have Thor as just an assistant character, bro? Like, I want to play with Thor. Like, and he still hasn't been on the good ones. He finally came in on the one, the Infinity War one or whatever, when they didn't have X-Men no more. But like the whole mechanics and everything changed so much that it wasn't the same. I would have loved to have Thor on Marvel vs. Capcom 2. Coming in at number 8 was Twisted Metal 2, man. Twisted Metal 2 was fire, bro. This was a fun game. Kind of remind me of Road Rage back in the day, man. But like, this game, man, was just fire. Definitely a staple in the PlayStation franchise. And dude, Twisted Metal, dude, it was a fun ass game, bro. Like I wish they make a new Twisted Metal, because man, that game, it just had its own lane, bro. Like, it was a fire video game, and a lot of people voted on this. This next game coming in at number 7, top 7. I'm surprised this game got number 7, because man, me personally, I'm a super duper wrestling fan. My entire life I've been a wrestling fan. Since my first memories is watching wrestling with my grandparents. Like, wrestling is my number one passion, my number one love, dude. Like, that's what I want to be. That's the first thing I want to be growing up, was a professional wrestler, you know? So to see this game, WWE SmackDown 2, make the list, and its votes didn't even come from the wrestling. Its votes did not even come from the wrestling group that I actually posted the poll in. There was 7 groups I posted the poll in. Its main votes did not even come from the wrestling group, which surprised me. So for WWF SmackDown 2 to come in at number 7, salute to y'all gamers, man, because y'all really shocked me. A lot of those votes came from like the other groups outside of the wrestling group. I was surprised how little votes it actually got in the wrestling group. And it was probably because it was split between this and SmackDown 1, which didn't make the honorable mention or anything. But SmackDown 2, man, this was a fun game. Any wrestling game, like, I already fucked with heavy just because I'm a wrestling mark, you know? But for other people in these other groups, especially with all the votes and the totals that came in, I'm surprised this game came in at number 7. But you will hear no complaints from me with any wrestling game making the top 10 list. So salute to y'all for voting on SmackDown 2. I personally, like, when I'm in the poll, I put my poll in, I put my votes into, and dude, I did not vote for SmackDown, because like what I tell you guys when I make these polls in the several different groups, I say all the time, I say, look, all right, here's every video game for that game system. And I don't put every game because there's way too many, but I put like about 50 to 60 video games like that I know were popular, that were successful, that people messed with. And I also put, like, if there's a game not on the poll that is in your top 10, add it to the poll so other people, you know, I might have overlooked some games or might have forgot some games off the list. So I'll say, hey, I leave it open for people to add additional games for people to vote on or whatnot. And this game was not a game that I added. I think I added to the list, but it's not a game I voted on personally. So for other people to vote on it and put it into the top 10 for me is a great service. I'm glad y'all did, man, because, like, I don't think I vote on any wrestling games just because, like, my favorite wrestling games come later. Like the N64, there's definitely one on the N64, that WCW Nitro Revenge, which is the next episode coming out. Poll will be up later today, if not tomorrow, which is when, like, man, the wrestling games really stepped up in my opinion. But SmackDown 2 coming in at number 7. Coming in at number 6 on the list, man, this game would have been top 3 at first, but there were so many ties. Like there was like 2 games tied at number 1. There was 3 games tied at number 2. Another 2 games tied at number 3. Another 2 games tied at number 4. So I was like, you know what? I have to expand because at first I only had the poll in 3 groups. So I ended up going back and adding this poll to so what was number 10 and number 9 real quick. I will go at number 10 on the list was Bloody Roar. And at number 9 was X-Men versus Street Fighter. Coming in at number 8 was Twisted Metal 2. And number 7 is SmackDown 2. Coming in at number 6 on the list, I went and added 4 other groups to poll to 4 other groups. They didn't have as much time to vote as the other groups that I posted the information in a week in advance. They had 2 days to vote, and then I just added that just so I could break up all the ties and get like a clear. But going forward, I'm definitely gonna put the poll in those groups at the same time because they voted just as much as the people had a week to vote. So I appreciate the additional groups that from OTR to FWO to FAD to Afro Saiyan to Black Gamers Multiverse FWO. I appreciate y'all adding y'all votes because it really helped clarify. After I got the votes from them, there were no more ties, so it made it easier to go down the list of who's top 10 or whatnot, you know. But coming in at number 6, again, this game would have been top 3 if not for the additional groups. That's Resident Evil 1. I ain't gonna front, bro. Like I ain't one of them people who like something like, for instance, like, you know, when Jay-Z came out, like he didn't do that crazy, but once he got blew up, everybody wants to say, yo, I've been rocking with that person since day one. I'm not one of those people. I wasn't rocking with Resident Evil from out the gate. I never played Resident Evil 1. I didn't come into Resident Evil number 2. I'm gonna keep it funky with y'all. So I have no history or no memory with this game. But Resident Evil, for a lot of people, apparently is held to a high regard. I would have thought Resident Evil 2, but I can't really gauge because I haven't played Resident Evil 1 to gauge. But I thought Resident Evil 2 was the shit. So like I'm surprised Resident Evil 2 didn't make top 10 or honorable mention. But Resident Evil 1 definitely got mad love, especially during the initial first 3 groups that voted on the polls. But at the end, once tallied up with the other groups that were added on to leave their votes, Resident Evil 1 came in at number 6. One of the games that was very low on the top 10 initially that surprisingly boosted up to number 5 thanks to the 4 or 5 other groups that were added to the polls. And deservingly so is Crash Bandicoot. And deservingly so because Crash Bandicoot is the PlayStation, or at least it was PlayStation's attempt at their own mascot. Like it was their version of Mario. It was their version of Sonic the Hedgehog. Like you don't see Crash Bandicoot on those Sega games. You don't see Crash Bandicoot on those Nintendo games like that. Like this was their mascot or their intended mascot initially. You know what I'm saying? Which is why when you watch Video Game House and they show like Crash Bandicoot on the corner, they're like, keep driving, he's broke, don't let him in the car, Luigi. Like I don't know if y'all haven't seen Video Game House by RDC Road, y'all need to go check that out, man. That is a hilarious, those skits, that and Anime House, man, I love those so hard, bro. Like those are some hilarious shows, man. You got to see those skits if you haven't seen them already. But man, Crash Bandicoot could have been PlayStation Sonic the Hedgehog, could have been Mario. They just weren't consistent. They weren't, you know, constantly putting them out. Maybe it might have been due to the sales not being so great or whatnot. It was definitely a fun game. It probably just didn't do well sales wise, but I hated how they constantly were like reboot the same video game, just add a couple of graphic improvements or whatnot to it or whatever the case may be. You know, you had Crash Racing or whatnot, but Crash Bandicoot makes top 5, man. Coming in at top 4. This game would have been top 3, maybe even top 2 if it wasn't for one group, and I ain't gonna say which group, but one group really propelled Tony Hawk Part 2 out of that top 3 spot, man. But Tony Hawk Pro Skater 2, this was personally my favorite Tony Hawk Pro Skater in the entire franchise, and I think a lot of it had to do with the track list, the music list, man. At this time, they had Sound Bombing, bro. Like Sound Bombing 2 was on this game, bro. Most Def, man. That was my shit back in high school. Sound Bombing 2, man, with Most Def, bro. That song, B-Boy Document, classic, one of the greatest hip hop tracks back in that day, bro. Like at that time, that was so fire, bro. I can't even tell you how fire that Sound Bombing album was, bro. But real talk, man. Seeing some of the comments over here, man. The PS2 is a go, man. PS2. When we get to PS2, man, I'm expecting the votes and everything to be crazy for that, because like the votes for PlayStation 1 have been significantly higher than the last couple of game systems, because I'm starting from the oldest game system and just working my way all the way down. But it seems like the more current the game system, the more votes and the more interactive it starts to get in these groups or whatnot. Tony Hawk Pro Skater 2, man. This was a game, I don't care if you're a skater or not, bruh. Everybody was rocking with Tony Hawk Pro Skater 2, bruh. Like, this game was just too fun, bruh. Like, this game, if you weren't a skater, it made you want to be a skater. This game had a lot of people who didn't skate go through a skateboard phase where, like, everybody was trying to fucking skateboard, bruh. Like, I couldn't skateboard for shit. I was that motherfucker trying to fucking, start off on the knee with one knee with the other knee scooting and everything. You know what I'm saying? I would struggle with the skating, bro. But like, man, like it had everybody and their mom trying to be a skater or whatnot. 20 views up in here right now. Salute to y'all, man. Make sure y'all hit that share with everybody, man. Make sure y'all go and hit up that the whole effing show on Facebook, where you can catch past episodes of top 10. We've already reviewed the top 10 Sega games, top 10 Nintendo, top 10 Super Nintendo, Sega CD, Sega Saturn, and so on and so forth. Christmas movies. So I don't just do it for video games, I do it for everything from anime or whatnot. But I've been starting with the video games first. For the most part, coming in at number 3, this game got into the top 3 off of one group specifically. It was number 1 in that group, and the numbers in that group were so high for this game, it propelled them. Because at first it was probably like top, maybe even an honorable mention. Probably wasn't even top 10, but one group voted on this game so heavy it went all the way up to top 3, and I'm disgusted it got top 3 because wasn't my cup of tea. I'm a Street Fighter guy, so I'm biased. But Tekken 3 came in at number 3. That's the big 3, dude. I used to be on my knee, dog. I used to be on one knee trying to roll down the hill on the skateboard and trying to figure that shit out, bro. I ate it so many times. I bruised myself up and scratched myself up so many times trying to ride a skateboard, trying to get on that Tony Hawk wave, man. All my boys was on it, dog. Like that Tony Hawk, there was a phase with that Tony Hawk and yo-yos. And this is like back in like, I want to say 2000, 2001. Everybody was trying to skateboard. Everybody was trying to get on the yo-yos and shit. It was just a fun time, bro. I ain't gonna front, but man, I agree, Reggie, man. Tekken 3, number 3, bro. I'm mad about it. This would not have made my top 10. It wouldn't have made my honorable mention. If anything, I would have probably put Tekken 2 over Tekken 3, man. I don't know why, bro, but Tekken 2 was kind of slapping, bro. But Tekken 3 coming in at number 3, bro. The irony. I played all the Tekken games. Again, I always felt like Tekken was just like, I don't know, I put it. And I know everybody got their own personal opinions on this. I'm like, me personally, we're not going to do that with the Afro Samurai girl. I'm sorry I throw you out the Afro Samurai, but man, y'all surprised me with Tekken 3 as y'all number 1 game. But that was clearly head and shoulders in that group. And that's why it's important y'all vote in these other groups, man. Salute to Afro Samurai, because, man, they were one of the groups they were like probably the last or second to last group that I added the poll to. And they probably voted like as a group overall more than any other group, and other groups had a week. So man, if y'all want these lists and these top 10 to accurately portray what your top 10 would be, like the best chance is just take a little. It don't take long, man. It don't take long. It take at the most 3 minutes to pick your top 10 favorite video games. We all was kids. We all had these game systems. By PlayStation 1, we all had these game systems, man. Like, if you didn't, you had a friend whose house you went to and you played. I know you played at least 10 PlayStation games. So y'all just, it's up to y'all to vote. Otherwise, stuff like this happens, man. Tekken 3 at number 3. It's definitely one. This one even made my honorable mention. I ain't even on front, but that was the tally, and this is over several groups. There was about 100 votes for Tekken 3 overall when you add up all the votes, but a large chunk of it came from a big part came from Afro Saiyan group. Coming in at number 2, I can't complain with 1 and 2. Coming in at number 2, and you can make the argument for number 1, Metal Gear Solid, bro. Metal Gear Solid, bro. This game was the shiznit, bro. Like, man, there's just so much dope to this game. Like, I could rant forever about Metal Gear Solid. I love the stealth, man, creeping around with the box, like, you know what I'm saying? Like, you just have to sneak through the lasers and the lights and the guards. The boss fights were strategic. It wasn't so simple. Like, you really had to have a strategy. The story felt so mature. You know what I'm saying? From like the conversations you would have on the intercom with your boy and the overall goal, objective, mission, the story. It was well put. Like, this could have been a movie. Like, honestly, they could have made Metal Gear Solid into a movie or whatever. Like, it really felt like real in like its story and everything, and like the dialogue and everything. Metal Gear Solid was just a great video game, well executed. Every Metal Gear Solid game was fire to me, man. Like, definitely a top 5, top 10. Every single last one of them that came out was just well executed. They definitely took their time with it. I can't wait for the next Metal Gear Solid game, man. Like, that whole franchise, wildfire, bro. Coming in at number 1, like, I ain't gonna front. This is the first top 10, I believe, where my top 10 or my number 1 game actually was the number 1 game voted on by everybody as a total. And I agree with you, bro. Metal Gear Solid was just so perfect, bro. Like, this would have been my personal number 2 game. But if it would have got the number 1, I wouldn't even be mad at it beating out my number 1 game, because this was just such a perfectly put together video game, bro. Like, it was really ahead of its time in so many ways, man. So Metal Gear Solid, I'm glad we can agree with everybody in these groups at least number 2. If some people feel is number 1, I would have no argument with you on that. And coming in at number 1, man, like, I am so pleased this game is number 1 for its system, because to me personally, this is probably my number 1. Like, if it's not my number 1, it's probably tied with Marvel vs. Capcom 2 for my favorite video game of all time, and Legends of Zelda, A Link to the Past. Like, those are my 3 favorite games. Link to the Past for Super Nintendo, Marvel vs. Capcom 2 for the Dreamcast and PlayStation 2, and this game would also be tied, if not my number 1 video game of all time, and that is Final Fantasy VII, man. I am so glad we got this one right, man. I was worried for a second because it was getting close. Once it got down to the top 6 video games, it was getting scary close. I was scared Tekken for a minute. I was scared. Now, I ain't gonna say 6, the top 4 games. I was scared for a minute, like, wow, man, Tekken is almost about to beat out Final Fantasy VII. Like, what the hell? Tony Hawk almost beat out Metal Gear Solid and Final Fantasy VII. It was by a very small margin. I believe Final Fantasy beat out Metal Gear by, let me see the total. It beat it out by 4 votes. Final Fantasy VII beating out Metal Gear by 4 votes. Metal Gear only beat out Tony Hawk Pro Skater by 2 votes. And Tony Hawk Pro Skater, Tekken 3 by 2 votes, and Tekken 3 only beat out Tony Hawk by 1 vote. Man, Final Fantasy VII, man. I cannot say enough good things about this game. Me personally, again, I'm not one of those people to act like I was there from day one. This is the very first Final Fantasy game I played in the entire franchise. I didn't go back and play any of the older ones before that. Some people try to like debate the older ones, or some like Final Fantasy 4 or whatever is the greatest. I can't really debate anything past that, but going forward, I could say this is, to this day, and I played every Final Fantasy since this one, this is still my favorite. It still holds up. Even I still hold this one higher in regard than the remake, even though the remake, the graphics are mwah, and even though the other Final Fantasy that came out after this were way better visually with the graphics, man. Something about Final Fantasy VII is just like, I just can't explain it. The 3-disc fire. I mean, this is back in the day too, where like, you know, you'd have the albums come out and like you'd have like the double disc Tupac album, the double disc Biggie album, and you know, like people dropping out two disc albums and everything like that. And then you had a video game like Final Fantasy VII drop 3-disc on you. And even though the 3rd disc was just the final boss and everything, like still 3-disc fire, bro. Like this game really, the freedom of exploring, and you can just go wherever you want, man. I put so many hours into this game. Like I'm ashamed of how many hours I put into this game, but a lot of those hours are probably just being at the little golden casino that they had. I forgot the name of it. Just doing the snowboarding and the motorcycle, and you know what I'm saying. They had the little like danger room. You could go up in there and you could earn like special materia that you couldn't get anywhere else. And you know, the side quest getting Yuffie and Vincent Valentine and Sid, and man, all the characters on that game were just so fire. But I think that more than anything is what really set it apart. Every character on that game was just so distinctively different. The designs were different. At that time, those graphics were fucking the shit. And going forward, you could see that like Final Fantasy 8, Final Fantasy 9, 10, the graphics constantly got way better. But I feel that story, those characters, the personalities, the chemistry between the characters and their dialogue and interaction with each other was just better. And one thing that also stood out to me, aside from the mini games, not only at the arcade, but they had mini games and stuff that you could do outside of the arcade or whatnot. One of the things I love so much about Final Fantasy VII that I don't see in any other RPG game is everybody, like, the world was so freaking big, and you would go into these different little cities and different little towns and areas or whatnot, and not only were the cities and everything so well put together and so huge, they felt like their own little, you know, their own little areas, and so much you could do in each of these little different cities and towns and whatnot. But every house, and there was a gang of houses, a gang of stuff, every house you could go inside of. Every house there was a family or a couple people, or you know what I'm saying, inside of everything. And every person you walked up to, you could talk to, they had their own dialogue. Some of them had multiple dialogues. Some of them had certain things that if you answered stuff correctly, it'll hint you to like, all right, you could go and get this and find this material. Oh, you could go and do this, and you could, it'll be a part of, you know what I'm saying, if you do these things in order, you could go and get, unlock Vincent Valentine. Oh, you go and do this certain amount of things, and you could get the chickaboos, breed the chickaboos. You know, you have the chickaboo races, the chickaboo breeding, where you can go and birth the chickaboos and all that. And different chickaboos had different chokaboos, or how you pronounce it, had different little things that they could do or whatnot. You know what I'm saying? Everybody trying to get the black chickaboo and everything. Like, there's just so much to do. Like, you could really play this game for so long. If you were like how video games nowadays, they have like all those little side quests and stuff to get 100%. Like, this was that really, like, to me, it's like the first game that had like so much stuff you could do to get that 100%. Like, you could beat the game if you want to, but there were so many side quests and missions and stuff you could do that if you weren't just one of those people just trying to hurry up and shoot through the game, like, you could be in this game for hours upon hours, because there's just so much to do, man. So I am glad Final Fantasy VII definitely got its flowers. And to those people who be trying to say the other Final Fantasy games is better, what other Final Fantasy game had a remake? What other Final Fantasy game had the animation, the 3D animation movie and everything? Like, bro, there's a reason this is the one that got the remake. This is the one that it got the animated video, and it's constantly featured in Final Fantasy Tactics and the other little Final Fantasy games and everything, because this is the GOAT. This is the greatest Final Fantasy of all time. Don't debate me, debate your dad and mama. Look, man, I'm about here. Thank y'all for watching another episode of Top 10. I tried to keep it short, but dang, we have 44 minutes, about to go on 45. I just want to say real quick, one last time, I'm going to get my ugly face up off this screen, but make sure you guys do me a favor. Go to 5-Star Pod Splash. Check out all the episodes of Top 10 that you have not watched. Hit a like on them videos. Make sure you hit a like on this one as well. And you can go to the whole effing show shown at the bottom of the screen right there, either on my Facebook gaming channel or on my Twitch. Just type in the whole effing show. Make sure to hit that like, follow, subscribe. I greatly appreciate it. And you can also go to YouTube, Top Shelf TV. check that out as well. If you're wondering what 5-Star Pod Splash is, right there on the bottom corner underneath Top Shelf TV, that is another show I do. That is strictly a podcast. You can check that out on Anchor. Don't got too many episodes on that right now, but there will be more reviews for movies, pro wrestling, anime, and whatnot. Coming to that at a later date, man. Thank y'all for tuning in to another episode of Top 10 on 5-Star Pod Splash. Make sure y'all go to Game Haven. We got 870 something people in there right now. If you're a video gamer and you want to vote, you could go to Game Haven. You can also go to Rareform Gaming on Facebook, and you could join either one of those groups to leave the polls. I'm not going to promote the other groups because some of these groups are pretty exclusive. They kind of have criteria. Like, I don't want to get into the criteria, but they have certain criteria. So I don't want to go and tell you to join their groups because you might not be, it's for the thick skin. You might not be ready for some of these other groups and the conversations that go on in some of these groups. Very exclusive groups. So, man, once again, make sure y'all go to Rareform Gaming and join that so you could vote on the next top 10. The next top 10 is going to be the top 10 I'm sorry, I said that wrong. The top 10 Nintendo 64 games, because we are going in order. We just did Sega Saturn, and then we just did today PlayStation 1. I will be putting the top 10 list of games for Nintendo 64 into the chat, or into these different groups, into the polls. So make sure y'all gonna have until this day next week. You're gonna have until Saturday next week to get your votes in. Top 10 Nintendo 64 games. It's up to y'all, man. I am begging you. I'm pleading with y'all. Just take 3 minutes out of your day when y'all see these posts in the groups and just vote on your top 10 so that we can get a somewhat accurate list. Because, man, Tekken 3 at number 3, man. I wouldn't have made my top 10 list personally, but it ain't about me. It's about y'all, man. It's about the group, the majority. And, man, that is what we voted on. So I'm glad Final Fantasy VII. This is the first time my top 10 game on a game system actually got number 1. So we're starting to get there. We're starting to see eye to eye a little bit, man. Thank y'all for tuning in. Make sure y'all go hit that like, follow, subscribe on the whole effing show, whether you're on Facebook or Twitch, Top Shelf TV if you're watching from YouTube. I appreciate y'all. Y'all have a great weekend. Stay safe. Take care. We out.